My name is Richard Flood, and I'm the Chief Curator here at the Walker Art Center. Tonight we'll be conducting a dialogue with Matthew Barney, who has just completed his Cremaster cycle, a series of 5 films shot out of sequence and which has been engrossing the art world and increasingly the world of film over the past 8 years. The films deal with a dense body of material involving architecture, mythology, and great religions of the Western world. And now, please join us for the dialogue with Matthew Barney. If anybody here has had the pleasure of trying to write about what it is that Matthew does, one of the first things that you are saddled with is you've got to explain Cremaster. And I think there's always that moment when you're like, it's like, you've written about it a lot. It's like, how many different ways can you find to describe what the Cremaster muscle is? And it's a very, very interesting starting point insofar as you're not at a film. You're at an understanding of a biological phenomena. And I think if you don't know what Cremaster is the muscle that... Do you want to say it? 'Cause I'm very shy.
I think you should finish what you were saying.
Okay. It is because I had to do it for the brochure for tonight. It's actually in there. You could refer to your brochure. But I will tell you, it is essentially the male testicles, or if you're writing the other side of the story, the male gonad, are lowered and retract according to certain stimuli like fear and coldness. So that's one part of the story. And it's very primal, when you really think about it. And the other thing that is there through all of the films is this moment of non-differentiation of the fetus in the womb. A moment when the sexual determination has not been set and the child has this one moment of being free of the burdens of sexuality. Or maybe that's the wrong thing to say. It probably has all the burdens of sexuality and none of the burdens of being distinctly sexual. So is that kind of...
Well, I think that was the first model that I latched onto as a way of thinking about this piece that would move through these 5 locations, and it would follow the development of a form of some sort, an organism that had that would be defined in a somewhat biological way, that it had a predetermined ending, and that it was battling with itself over how it could overcome its condition, basically, and maintain its lack of differentiation. So the reproductive system, that model became the most concrete thing I could hold on to, I think, when I started the project, and sort of thinking if the project, within that model, the whole project would live in this pregenital realm, and that if the thing that would take it out of that realm and to its final resting place would be the downward movement of these internal reproductive organs, that the project needed conflict somehow, right? It needed to assign something as its sort of governor. And so the Cremaster muscle, or an abstraction of the Cremaster muscle, became this sort of way of thinking about, well, if the whole war within this system is about where these organs are going to end up, then the Cremaster muscle would be the governor that's pulling them down.
Did you ever, for an instant, look back and say, gee, I wish I hadn't named all the children Cremaster?
Maybe. For different reasons. I think that I think now I don't feel that way. I think that when maybe it'd be useful to talk about how the project started on the Isle of Man, in that the idea was that we would film the piece one summer, and then the following summer we would go back to Great Britain, and it would be broadcast on television during the week that the TT race occurs around the Isle of Man.
We're talking now, we've decided to go through the evening just as a point for you. We've decided to go through the evening with the chronology of the films as they were shot.
Mm-hmm. And so I couldn't convince a television station to air the piece. So went back to New York with it and took it to the Public Theater in New York, and we basically rented a theater and showed it as a video projection, which I wasn't very happy with in terms of its color saturation. I really wanted it to have that broadcast sports feeling and a real like a very heavy saturation color, a flatness. And so somebody had suggested, why don't you transfer it to film, which I did, and that really started this other path that the project took, this way that the moving image aspect of the project ended up in art house cinemas.
But it was also, it began also the use of the very particular nature of the Isle of Man really informed the project. I forget what exactly you were looking at as a location, because the Isle of Man came late, right? You were basically looking for a Celtic site.
Right, a Celtic architectural condition of some sort. And ended up on the Isle of Man, yeah. Some of the locations were, like the region was fixed, but the specific character wasn't defined.
And then once you were on the Isle, though, a lot of things started making sense and were really became deeply embedded into the film as well.
Yeah, and it was the first. I do want to get back to the question that I never answered, which is to do with the way that that after 4 and then 1, which both had a similar sensibility, I think this broadcast sports sensibility, were transferred to film, that 5 had a slightly different agenda when it was made, knowing that it would have, that it would fulfill its role within the cycle as a generator of sculpture and part of the sculptural work. It also would have this life in the cinema. I made it differently. And then 2 and 3 followed in the same way, that it was made conscious of the fact that it would exist as a film. So I think it was at that point, around the time of 5, that the burden of the Cremaster, that the sort of biological frame didn't become as useful anymore. But that said, I'm still happy with the title.
And you stayed with it as a topic. It never goes away.
Yeah, the Isle of Man in a way was the prototype for the rest of the project. The way the location would, in the case of the Isle of Man, it started with the flag, probably the 3 legs, and trying to take the island and create a kind of a body out of the island that would have 3 factions that were in conflict with one another, and taking the